I had a sit-down interview at the U.S. Capitol today with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Coming up here in this part, this is the part where she seems to get a little aggravated with me. I asked her about something that was going on in the Capitol while I was there, which is that House Republicans were trying to turn the story of Eric Massa's resignation into a Nancy Pelosi ethics scandal. By the end of the day, it was clear that that plan was not working out very well for the Republicans, but I asked the Speaker about it in the middle of the afternoon today. Here's what she said. As we move toward what seems to me to be the very end of the health care fight, the Republicans are trying to make a whole new issue. And I have to ask you about this because it's sort of the story of the day from the Republican perspective. And they're trying to make an issue of Congressman Massa's, not just his resignation, but how allegations against him were handled. Do you support the Ethics Committee investigating not Congressman Massa, because he's gone now, but how the allegations against him were handled? Do you support that?
Well, that was what we had voted on the floor to refer it to the Ethics Committee. Sure.
Okay. And in terms of how the allegations were handled, when was your office first told about concerns about his behavior?
Well, any report to our office was in February that there was an allegation against him, and at the same time that it was referred to the Ethics Committee, and that was the appropriate room. I'm now finding out that there had been a conversation earlier, but it had nothing to do to even come close to any kind of an allegation. It was repeated something that had been in the newspaper the day before. But in terms of anything that is worthy of the attention of the Ethics Committee, that was in February when it was reported to the Ethics Committee.
So just to be clear, that earlier, several months ago allegation in October, I believe, not an allegation, but rather that something was referred to staffers in your office, member services director, but
a staffer, yeah.
A staffer in your office, but it was not something that your staff believed rose to the level of an allegation.
There are all kinds of articles that are written about many members in the Congress, and I don't think we want to get to a place. Besides, I served on the Ethics Committee for 7 years. When I say served, it was almost like a sentence, because it's very tough duty, and I commend the people who serve there and the service they provide to the Congress. But the last thing we would have wanted then was any intervention from the Speaker's office. There's an appropriate way for an allegation to be sent to the Ethics Committee, and it shouldn't be something that is the Speaker's office is the melting or the mixing pot or whatever.
Are you troubled though now with, I mean, Congressman Massa's behavior since he, around the time that he resigned and since he resigned, has been inconsistent. He initially, for example, made an allegation that he was being forced out because he was a vote against health care, and then he recanted that allegation. He's made some other inconsistent statements. But we're left with the impression that he may have behaved inappropriately toward people who worked for him and toward other people who worked in this building.
That's up to the Ethics Committee to investigate. But the fact is that you started this conversation in the right way. It's another subject that people would like to be a distraction. I will not take my eye off the ball, which is to pass health care reform right now and at this time to build support for what we are doing. And people like to mix those two. Not you, but the Republicans. You're never to be taken for one of them, but I know you're nonpartisan. But in any event, for me, I'm not paying a lot of attention to some of that. It's appropriately being dealt with where it's being dealt with. What I'm paying attention is how do we get to what we have dreamed of, to follow in the footsteps of Social Security, Medicare, health care for all Americans. It's a very heavy lift. It's very labor intensive. Our members have spent a great deal of time on it, and we want to protect that investment. 1 year ago, March 5th, the President called Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, to the White House to begin a bipartisan dialogue. He had outside stakeholders, whether it's children's health experts, insurance company, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, community health center, every aspect of health care and health insurance at the White House to try to find common ground to go forward. 1 year later, he had a summit that was just House and Senate, Democratic and Republican leadership, to see if there was any common ground, or reach out one more time to include Republican suggestions in the bill. Now we are ready to act upon those suggestions and the great work that the president has done. Let me say this about President Obama. Were it not for his leadership, we would not be right now on the verge of passing something very historic.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi there, pivoting away from a discussion about the controversy swirling around Eric Massa's resignation to bring the discussion back to health care. The Speaker making clear that she thinks Republicans are now harping on the Massa issue as a way of trying to distract from the end game in health reform. When I pressed the Speaker on what her office had been told about the allegations against Mr. Massa, she insisted that before her office and House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer's office heard about the most recent allegations, which went to the Ethics Committee and blew the whole story open and resulted in Mr. Massa resigning. She said the only thing her office had previously heard about Mr. Massa did not, in her words, even come close to any kind of allegation. She said that the issue that had been referred to her office back in October of last year was a minor issue that repeated something that had been written in a newspaper article. She was talking about this article from the Evening Tribune, a newspaper out of Hornell, New York. The article is not critical of Mr. Massa. It's a day-in-the-life piece in which he is shadowed by a reporter. The article describes Mr. Massa as living in a townhouse with 5 of his admittedly poorly paid staffers in order to save them all money. Still, though, the House voted almost unanimously to let the Ethics Committee decide whether and how to investigate whether allegations against Mr. Massa were dealt with appropriately. That's even though Mr. Massa himself would not be the subject of any investigation because he's no longer a member of the House. You could almost smell how excited Republicans were to try to make this an anti-democratic leadership issue today. They were very excited about that prospect for some number of minutes this afternoon. And for some of those minutes, I was actually inside the U.S. Capitol, and I swear you could smell it in there. But any attempt to make this a really big political stink today seems to have fizzled out rather quickly. Nice try, though.